Hi, Epic Recaps here, and today I am going to explain to you a 2019 horror thriller titled, Ready or Not. If you want to be spoiled, keep watching. The movie opens and it's the year 1989. Inside the Le Domas mansion, siblings Daniel and Alex are running around, while being followed by a man named Charles. Daniel hides Alex in a closet before he is approached by Charles, the new husband of the boy's Aunt Helene. Charles, who is suffering from a wound, pleads with Daniel to help him. Instead, Daniel alerts the rest of his family, and Helene, who tries to save her husband, is held back as he is shot multiple times with a crossbow as a frightened Daniel looks on. The scene changes to 30 years later, and Alex is getting married to a woman named Grace. She is nervous but eager to join his family's gaming empire, which is how they came about their enormous wealth. Daniel interrupts the couple and playfully teases Alex, offering Grace one last chance to back out. The couple attends a photo shoot prior to the ceremony, along with other members of Alex's family. Daniel is joined by his wife Charity, who is open about the fact that she only married Daniel for his family's money. Their father Tony is visibly disapproving of Grace, but not nearly as much as Alex's Aunt Helene, who shoots Grace a death glare. More approving is Alex and Daniel's mother Becky, who tells Grace that only Alex's opinion matters. Shortly after, Grace and Alex are married in front of their family and friends. Later that night, Grace and Alex prepare for their wedding night, but they are interrupted by Helene, who appears from a secret passage and reminds Alex that everyone is waiting downstairs for them. When Grace questions him, Alex confesses to Grace that as per tradition with every new addition to the Le Domas family, she has to join the family for a game at midnight. Hoping to take the opportunity to win his family over, Grace laughs at the absurdity. Downstairs, Alex is joined by Tony in the dining room. When his father asks if he's prepared to do whatever is necessary, he informs Tony that he and Grace will be leaving for good in the morning. Grace and Alex are joined by Alex and Daniel's cokehead sister Emily, who's just arrived, along with her husband Fitch Bradley, and their sons Georgie and Gabe. When Stevens, the butler, announces that it's 11:55 p.m., everyone leaves to gather in the game room, and Alex is reluctant to follow. Behind closed doors, the family is seated around the table, and Tony explains to Grace that this tradition was started by his great-grandfather Victor Le Domas, who amassed significant wealth that now includes multiple professional sports teams. Owner of a small board game company, Victor was gifted this wealth by a benefactor named Mr. LaBelle, who challenged Victor to solve a mysterious puzzle box. Having succeeded, he granted Victor and his future generations their wealth, as well as the mysterious puzzle box. Tony places a blank card and tells Grace that Mr. LaBelle will decide which game they play that night. Charity mentions she got chess, while Fitch got Old Maid. All eyes are on Grace as she draws hide and seek, and the room falls silent. Tony instructs Grace to stay hidden until dawn in order to win, which does not sound appealing to her at all. Indicating they have an advantage, Tony tells her the cameras are turned off to keep the game as authentic to Victor's time as possible, but doesn't mention the locking of the windows and doors and wishes her good luck. Haunting music begins to play as Grace makes her way upstairs to hide. The family arms themselves with guns with the exception of Helene and Fitch, who help themselves to an axe and crossbow instead. Grace discovers a dumbwaiter and climbing inside, she closes the door behind her. As the family starts out, Becky approaches Alex and suggests it might be best if he sat the game out, and she instructs Charity to watch the door. As the family goes off to find Grace, Alex leaves through a secret door, before Charity enters and discovers him missing. Tired of sitting in the dumbwaiter, Grace leaves and wanders about the creaky floor, which wakes up Clara, the maid watching over the young boys. Noticing that George is missing, she goes about looking for him. In the hallway, Grace avoids being seen by Clara but is found by Alex, who covers her mouth and tells her to be quiet before taking cover behind a bed. Clara follows the commotion and is about to discover them when she hears glass break outside. Investigating, a gunshot rings out, and Clara's face is blown off. Emily runs in, thinking it was Grace, but she realizes her error as the family gathers around the body. They admonish her and Tony reminds everyone that they need Grace alive for the ritual. The family leaves to continue the search and drags Clara's dead body away, as Grace sits in horror at what she's just witnessed. Alex pulls her into the secret passage right before Emily returns to the room to give herself a pep talk. In the corridor, Alex explains the truth to her, that hide and seek for the Ladamuses means that they think they need to hunt Grace and kill her before dawn, otherwise something bad will happen to the family. Alex tries to calm her down when she becomes enraged, admitting that he didn't tell her about this because he feared that she would leave him, but he promises a tearful Grace that he'll find a way to get her out safely. Alex tells her he'll override the system to unlock the windows and doors and will meet her at the kitchen. Tearing off the bottom of her dress, she makes her way to a door. Muttering a curse before opening it, she is immediately spotted by Tony, Helene, and Daniel. They try to shoot her, but Emily, fresh off another line of coke, starts wildly firing at Grace and misses. She escapes the gunfire and running through the rooms, she is unable to find a way out and is discovered by Daniel. Pleading for her life, Daniel appears sympathetic to his brother's new wife, and so he gives Grace a head start before alerting everyone. When the family arrives at the study, Emily is given Fitch's crossbow after she tells them she lost her gun. Another maid runs into the room but is accidentally shot by Emily as she tinkers with her new weapon. An agitated Helene chops Tina's head off when she won't stop groaning and lectures Tony on tradition when he suggests they turn on the cameras to locate Grace. When the siblings won't stop bickering, Becky tells Daniel to help his father with the cameras and instructs the rest of them to locate Alex. Grace is still on the run and stops in the game room, remembering the rifle and ammo she saw earlier, and she loads up. Checking the door, she waits for Alex in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Alex is in the control room and manages to turn on the cameras but not the locks. Stevens enters the kitchen to make tea, as Grace tries to remain hidden. Just as he's pouring a cup, he hears the sound of the lock being disabled and makes his way to the door. Grace appears from her hiding spot, and when she tries to shoot Stevens, he tells her the ammo is just for display. Approaching her, Grace smashes the teapot over his face and manages to escape. Back at the control room, Tony is pounding on the door as Alex cheers on Grace, before he smashes the controller and turns the screens blank. Tony barges in just then and attacks Alex, who fights back. Daniel convinces him to back down, which only gives Tony a chance to knock him out. When his dad questions his loyalty, Daniel tells him he just distracted Alex for him, and the pair drag Alex's body out. When Grace discovers Dora, the last surviving maid, she silences the girl by crushing her to death and turns to run in the opposite direction. The family handcuffs Alex in his bedroom when Stevens arrives and informs them the locks remain disabled. Tony is exasperated and cannot imagine how a blonde twit could outplay them all. Becky leaves to guard the doors and the siblings continue to squabble. Tony tells Helene that Alex has always rejected their tradition, but Helene thinks that Alex will come to accept his place in the family like she did when Charles was killed. Having been the only family member to ever see Mr. LaBelle, Alex was meant to lead the family and not run from it. Outside, a frightened Grace stands on the ledge, having heard the entire exchange, and jumps down from the ledge. Running to the stable, she spots Georgie walking around. Thinking he might help her, he pulls out a gun instead and shoots a hole into her hand. In response, she punches him in the face but is then startled by a goat, and she falls backward into a pit, where she discovers the corpses of unlucky family members. Climbing up the ladder, she reaches the top, but when the ladder gives way, she stabs her hand into a nail to hold on. Managing to pull herself out, she runs to the gate where she spots an oncoming car and breaks a piece off to squeeze through. She sustains a deep cut, but she pushes through and is devastated when the car doesn't stop. Shortly after, Stevens drives up and sees that she's escaped into the woods. He notifies the family via video chat and Tony loses his mind, convinced that they will perish at dawn. Back outside, Stevens catches up to Grace, who fights him off and manages to escape in his car. Driving away, she attempts to contact a TripSafe rep for help. The agent informs her that the vehicle has been reported stolen and shuts the car down just as Stevens appears and sedates her with a tranquilizer. Heading back towards the mansion, he calls the family to let them know he is Grace. He turns up the radio and doesn't hear the family warn him that Grace is waking up, and they watch in horror as she smashes his head not once, but twice in, which results in the car rolling over. Stevens dies on impact, but Grace survives and stumbles out of the car, but is discovered by Daniel, who who knocks her out. Back at the mansion, Becky visits Alex and tells him she likes Grace, but has to protect the family. Alex tells her that he will kill her if anything happens to his wife, and Becky doesn't believe he will turn his back on them. The family places Grace on an altar to begin the ritual to sacrifice her to Mr. LaBelle. They start by drinking from a chalice, but moments after, everyone begins to violently puke, with the exception of Daniel, who quickly releases Grace. Meanwhile, Alex also manages to escape and makes his way downstairs. Daniel tries to help Grace get out, but Charity finds them and shoots Daniel in the neck. Grace attacks her and grabbing the gun, she realizes it's out of bullets and proceeds to pistol whip her. Grace goes back to Daniel, but he tells her to go, between gasps for air. Tony then goes for Grace and tries to kill her himself, but she hits him over the head with a lantern and drops it, causing the curtains to catch fire. Alex arrives and tries to save his brother, but is too late. Grace is then found by Becky, who misses with her arrow but then tries to strangle Grace. The women struggle and Grace bludgeons her to death with the puzzle box. Alex walks in on the horrific scene, and when he approaches her, he realizes that she will never stay with him now, so he turns on her and gives her up to his family. With the sun rising, the family rushes through the ritual, and as Alex is about to plunge the dagger into her heart, Grace breaks Helene's grip and gets stabbed in the shoulder. Jumping off the table, she holds them back with the dagger as Helene draws the curtains and begs for forgiveness from Mr. LaBelle. They recoil in horror for their impending death, and when nothing happens, they awkwardly stare at Grace. Refusing to fail, Helene is determined to kill her, and grabs an axe, when suddenly, boom! Helene explodes into a bloody mess. The family realizes that they really are screwed. Fitch explodes next, followed by a begging Charity. Emily tries to get away with Georgie and Gabe, but they all burst too. Tony tries yelling about how he followed the rules, but he turns into paste as well. Alex then tries to weasel his way into getting Grace's forgiveness, but she hands him her ring and says she wants a divorce. Boom! There goes Alex. The fire from the curtains then spreads around the house, and for a brief moment, Grace sees the spirit of Mr. LaBelle sitting in his chair, and he nods approvingly to her. Grace exits the burning mansion, now covered in blood. She sits on the steps to smoke a cigarette, just as police and paramedics arrive. An officer asks Grace what the hell happened, to which she simply replies, "In-laws." Let us know your thoughts on the film in the comments below. If you want another heart-pounding thriller, watch our next movie recap about a tortured woman living in an old mansion with her 2 children.